On today's program, we're going to talk about Revelation chapter 12. John gives 7 personages that show us the great historical view of God's plan of the ages. And to me, this is one of the finest chapters for that. Gary Stimman is here to discuss with me the 7 personages of Revelation 12.
JR, it's going to be an interesting program today, and I'm going to read 12:1 right now. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. The first of 7 personages mentioned in chapter 12. This woman, JR, I suppose we could spend an hour talking about her, and we only have 30 minutes on today's broadcast. It's going to be interesting.
Well, first of all, I think she represents Mary, the virgin birth of Christ. Of course, the fact that she's in the stars here takes us all the way back to Seth, the son of Adam, who received special information from God. And by that, Josephus says, invented that peculiar sort of wisdom that deals with the heavenly bodies and their movements. In other words, the 12 great constellations. If you'll notice here, she has 12 stars, a crown of 12 stars on her head. Well, to me, that says that there are 12 constellations that circle the heavens, just as they circled her head. And they tell a tremendous story, God's great plan of the ages. How can we redeem fallen mankind? Must be the seed of the woman to bring salvation to planet Earth. That, to me, is step number 1 in these 7 personages that we see here.
And JR, she certainly represents the presence of Christ. You know, when we think of 12 of anything, we think of governmental perfection, we think of the 12 tribes of Israel. We see them, by the way, in the Old Testament, arranged around the tabernacle in the wilderness, and they're arranged in a circular fashion.
Yes, the 12 tribes.
It's the 12 tribes, just like the 12 stars we're talking about here. And JR, arranged in a heavenly fashion, they would be what the Jews used to refer to as Mazarot, the cycle of the heavens. And in one way, they represent the cycle of redemption.
Yeah. And you know, the interesting thing about it is, each one of these heavenly signs of the major constellations were attributed to one of the tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
The tribe of Judah, for example, their symbol was the lion. Well, there it is, Leo the lion. And this great story, the gospel message that was written in the heavens. We're not talking astrology here. Astrology was something that was developed after the flood of Noah in the Tower of Babel. And when men invented idolatry, they took God's great Bible in the stars and perverted it. Now you recall, Gary, I said that this represents Mary. In a larger sense, it represents the tribe of Judah, for they were the one who would bring forth the Messiah. And in an even larger sense, they represent all the 12 tribes of Israel as seen in the crown of 12 stars.
The second verse of Revelation 12 says, "And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered." So there is the mother and the child. And JR, before we go much farther, we can incorporate another factor in this chapter of Revelation. It's the 12th chapter of Revelation. And as you know from our past studies, each of the chapters of Revelation is represented by a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The 12th chapter is the 12th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Lamet. And JR, that is the letter said to symbolize teaching and learning, specifically learning a great moral lesson or moral teaching. And this chapter, I must say, really conveys a great teaching.
You know, this Lamed factor is interesting. I have an article in our magazine. This is the January magazine, and this particular chapter is given here. And under Lamed, under this letter, I have mentioned that Lamed is the tallest of all the Hebrew letters. It seems to be made up of a Kaf with a Vav on top of it. And you know, the Vav represents the Messiah, the connection between God and man. And the Kaf, his great accomplishment on Calvary. And so this in itself gives us the great teaching of chapter 12. It fits perfectly, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And you know, the center of the alphabet comes with the letters Kaf, Lamed, and Mem. And by the way, they are taken in reverse order. Mem, Lamed, Kaf spell Melech, or king. And here we have the birth of the king. The Lamed is associated throughout the Bible with teaching a great moral lesson. The women of the Bible are very much involved with this letter. Virtually everywhere you see this letter used in a teaching sense, it'll have a woman involved with it. For example, Esther, book of Esther, the book of Ruth, both very much involved with this letter. And here we have the Virgin Mary and the virgin birth of Christ.
Yeah. And Israel as the wife of Jehovah, bringing to the world the seed of the woman, the Son of God. Now, another little interesting tidbit about this Lamed, being made up of a Kaf and a Vav. The numerical value of Kaf is 20. The numerical number of Vav is 6, making a total of 26, which, by the way, is the same numerical value as Yahweh. So here we've got this God connection here. The seed of the woman is about to be birthed. And she's clothed in the sun, the moon under her feet. Gary, that's got to be Rosh Hashanah in September, the new moon of September.
Now explain how this is Rosh Hashanah. Of course, the Rosh Hashanah occurs on the 1st of Tishri.
Yes.
Tishri occurs in the fall. It corresponds to our month of September, usually early September.
And the fact that it's a new moon. The moon is under the feet of Virgo, and the sun is in Virgo. Well, if you'll check it out, the sun is in the constellation Virgo every year in September. So we've got the 1st of September mentioned here, and she's bringing forth a baby. To me, this says when Jesus was born. He was born at the new moon of September. You see, if Jesus was conceived on December 25th, 280 days prior, he could be born on Rosh Hashanah, a perfect gestation period from conception to birth. Which means, by the way, that Christmas on December 25th just happens to be the celebration of the incarnation.
That's right.
Of Christ. Not the birth as such, but the fact, this tells me that God looks at a person from the moment of conception as a real human being. That means the abortionists have a real problem here.
It certainly does. Well, that's not the only problem they have. And as we continue with this chapter, now the cast of characters expands a bit. We've had the woman, the child, the third verse, and there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
Yeah. Now, you know, this dragon is represented by the serpent figure or the dragon figure in the star charts. Let's take, for example, Draco, the dragon. Well, Draco goes around the northern hemisphere, and the length of Draco actually covers a third of the 360-degree circle of the stars. And then his prototype would be Hydra. You remember Leo the lion is jumping on Hydra, the many-headed serpent. Well, Hydra is a long snake. This python runs around a third of the 360-degree circle of the heavens. So even in the star charts, it tells the story of Lucifer, or Satan, actually causing a third of the angels to fall into his camp. And so there was a tremendous war in heaven, Gary, back in ages past.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't know exactly when. But Lucifer is a powerful being, and he was able to draw a third of the stars of heaven. That's what it says in verse 4 here.
And by the way, J.R., this has a literal truth. By the way, when Jesus was born, Herod and all his minions sought to kill the child. So there's a literal fulfillment of this in history.
Yes. Now, we're talking about a human being here, Herod the king.
Yeah.
But there's somebody behind the king,
Yes,
giving him thoughts and ideas to try to get rid of Jesus. And then those Roman soldiers who went down to Bethlehem.
Yeah.
All of this was orchestrated from behind the scenes in a demonic entity, in a demonic force. Well, I tell you, the book of Revelation has a lot in it, and we'll be back to tell you more in just a moment. Revelation chapter 12 offers one of the most powerful studies to be found in the whole Bible. It gives us the great plan of the ages, from the virgin who would bring forth the Son of God to his arch enemy, the dragon, and the battle that ensues. Gary, this is the story that all plots are made of.
indeed. It's the ultimate battle of good versus evil, but involving real people here. This is a struggle, the long struggle of national Israel against Satan.
You know, in Genesis 3:15, God told the serpent that the seed of the serpent would bruise the heel of the seed of the woman, but that the seed of the woman would come out victorious in the end. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, picks up where that left off.
And by the way, if you haven't studied the trail through the Bible, both of the serpent and of the seed of the woman, what an interesting study. J.R., the seed of the woman came down through the line of Seth to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. Judah, the line of Judah, brought forth King David, King Solomon, brought forth the whole lineage that we have in the book of Matthew, finally resulting in the virgin birth of Christ, which we read of in the first chapter of Matthew. This seed of the woman prophecy is what we are looking at here in the story of this great wonder in heaven, the woman about to bring forth a man-child.
And you know, in the star charts, we see Virgo, and then right at her feet is Libra. And then just beyond that is Scorpio, and Scorpio is seen with his claws trying to capture Libra. Well, that's the story here. Libra is actually the lamp. I know Libra is a pair of scales, you know, but let's go back beyond that star chart. Let's go back to the most ancient. The Babylonian star charts show Libra to be the servant lamp of the menorah. And you remember Simeon, the high priest, when he held the baby Jesus in his arms, he said, "This is the light of God, a lamp unto the Gentiles."
That's right.
And Jesus was depicted by Libra. And in fact, in the two decans with Libra, you can see, that is the sidereal side pieces that help tell the story of Libra. The Southern Cross, you know, the lupus, the victim, and all of this. It tells the story that the seed of the serpent, which is Scorpio, is after the seed of the woman, who is Libra. Yeah. That's the message there. That's what we see.
Jesus is referred to by John as a light, to lighten the world. John 1:4. And when J.R. mentions decans or decans, he's talking about 10-degree divisions in the 360-degree circle. There are basically 12 major elements in that circle, each one being 30 degrees, divided three ways into 10-degree segments, so that you have three shall we say, three parties in each little mini drama that's played out as these signs go past the year. And J.R., you pointed out a moment ago, but it's worth repeating, before there was astrology as we know it today, there was prophecy. And the heavens literally were a prophecy of the coming Messiah.
Yeah, you know, mankind they weren't here 12 million years ago or even 1 million years ago. The human race is only 6,000 years old. If it was older than that, there'd be more than 6 billion population on the planet. Had there not been the flood to take out almost everybody, but 8 people starting over only 4,500 years ago, or 4,400 years ago, we'd have a lot more than 6 billion people today. And so when you go back to the days before Noah, before the flood, during the antediluvian period from Adam to Noah, we have the development of God's original Bible. Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the beginning of our Bible. It tells us about the history of the human race. But if you go back before Moses, you don't have any written word. You don't have any voice from God if you don't have God's message in the stars. So right from the very beginning, God had a Bible written in the stars.
He did, and that was because he knew that people would conduct deep and worshipful studies into the layout of the stars and discern there the acts of God. Not of Satan, but the acts of God. You know, it's fascinating, J.R. Hebrew history tells us that Noah's son Shem was a contemporary of Abraham. Shem came through the flood on the ark. Mm-hmm. Now, that pretty much gives us a clue that the earth is not hundreds of thousands of years old, if the Bible narrative is to be believed. So we're talking now about Noah and his family coming down, setting up a new civilization, and at that point they began to look forward because they knew that all this had to come to an end, mm-hmm. and that it was prophesied.
You know, if you go back in all the cosmologies of ancient civilizations, you will find their worship around the stars.
Right.
Because the stars gave the only message God had for mankind. In fact, if you go to India, you will find the Buddhist concept that a virgin would conceive and bear the Son of God. If you go to China, to some of their ancient, mm-hmm. Their most ancient cultures, they also tell the story of a virgin mother that would bring forth the child God, mm-hmm. The Son of God. This is a part of every culture throughout history. You don't have religions that teach something else.
That's
they
right.
all revolve around. They may be idolatrous, but they still are a takeoff from God's original message in the stars. That's the important thing.
Very important. And now we come to Revelation 12:5. And she, that is the woman, brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. What a beautiful, short statement that is of the birth, public ministry, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ
and
in one tiny little verse.
Yeah, and the ascension.
The ascension, yeah.
What little time he spent on this earth, he came to do the most important work, to die on Calvary's cross to pay for our sins. And because Jesus died on Calvary, you and I have the hope of eternal life. And Gary, this is the most important verse of all the messages that we have here. The seed of the woman now bruises the head of the serpent, and he is effectively a defeated foe. And Jesus comes, he comes to pay the price for our sins, to redeem mankind. And then he goes back home to heaven, sits down at the right hand of the Father. He's been there ever since until Psalm 110 says his enemies are put down. Mm-hmm. And we are about to see, and by the way, you know, these verses talked about the first advent, but then they also talk about the second advent when it says the woman fled into the wilderness. That's the tribulation period. So we've gone from one verse to another, from 2,000 years ago to the future. We don't know how far away that future is, but we suspect it's going to happen soon. Israel is facing, and by the way, this woman here is a picture of Israel. Israel is facing today the wrath of the serpent.
Absolutely. And you know, J.R., you wonder as you read the news, why is it that tiny little Israel, which is just a fingernail of land in the midst of a huge sea of people surrounding, and tiny little Israel says, we want to live peacefully. We're willing to take this tiny little fingernail of land and to live peacefully with our brethren all around if you'll just allow us to do that. And yet those around say, no, we can't allow you to do that. We can't allow you to exist at all. Yeah. And the question is, why? What can you do to us? Well, the answer is cosmic in proportion. It's not a matter of little geography. There's a cosmic question here, J.R.
And this verse 6 talks about 1,203 days. That's half of the 7-year tribulation period. This is the last half, and poor Israel is going to be driven out into the wilderness. I suspect she'll be going to Petra. Petra's a ghost town today, just sitting there waiting to be inhabited. And Isaiah seems to think that's the place. But I tell you what, wherever it is, God's going to take care of Israel. We'll be back in just a moment.
I'd like to talk to you for a moment about an exciting new offer from Prophecy in the News, and that offer is the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary. Beautifully bound, beautifully produced, top-notch scholarship, and every page of these 4 volumes covering Matthew to Revelation is in full 4-color process. You're going to find an amazing array of maps, charts, artists' conceptions, sidebars, easy to read study aids, and as I said, the scholarship, well, Clinton Arnold, the general editor, Talbot School of Theology, you're going to find the Bible interpretation right on the mark. Now, this is different from anything Zondervan has done before. Well, let's look, for example, at Volume 1, page 172. Now, this is the Matthew study, and you'll find in here the story of the crucifixion of Christ at this point, but you'll also find a picture of the potter's field, Akeldama. You'll also find a sidebar about Barabbas and the thieves who were crucified with Christ, talking about the cultural ferment of the day, the fact that those thieves were really revolutionaries. You're also going to find a sidebar about the life of Pontius Pilate, including, by the way, the famous Pontius Pilate inscription, photograph of that. In short, you're going to receive a broad background, all the subjects that impinge upon the crucifixion of Christ. That's what's meant by Bible Backgrounds Commentary. Now, normally the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary retails for $159.95. At Prophecy in the News, we're going to make it available to you for only $134.95, and as an added inducement to ordering right now, we're going to include a free bonus, and that is the 3 VHS videotape set right in front of me. It's called Deciphering Daniel. It contains 12 studies, one for each of the 12 chapters of Daniel. It's an exciting study, and JR and I go into depth in these 3 VHS videotapes. Normally $49.95, yours absolutely free. Plus, we're going to also give you a free subscription, 1-year subscription to Prophecy in the News, our monthly magazine, and that would be valued at $29.95 altogether. This would be a $240 value, yours for only the price of the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary, and that's $134.95. This Zondervan publication is brand new. It's something very, very timely. Order today. Call the number on your screen right now.
The program we have today is written in our January issue of the magazine. On the front you see Project Jehovah. We talked about that for the last couple of weeks. But on today's program we dealt with Revelation. There's the article. It is a fascinating study on chapter 12 of Revelation, and this magazine, which sells in the bookstores for $2.95, you can have for free if you'll just call the phone number at the bottom of your screen. We'll be glad to send it to you. We don't offer it every month like that, but we want to hear from you. Gary, it's been a good program today.
It has, JR, and we're going to continue this study in our next get-together, so be sure and join us as we get into this ages-long conflict between the woman and the dragon.
Yes. This is J.R. Church and Gary Stearman. Until next time, keep looking up.
Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on audio tape, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on videotape. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now.